Welcome to Behind the Investigation on Atlanta News First Investigates. I'm investigative reporter Andy Parati. Joining me now is my colleague, investigative reporter Sierra Cummings. Sierra, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
I just want to say I am overly dressed for this Behind the Investigation. Usually we don't wear ties. You always look great, but usually...
I saw the suit and I was like, oh, this is really formal of Andy.
I have something to do in the studio right after this. But let's talk about something pretty serious. Your ongoing series, Stolen Sobriety, another really compelling case of a mom who allegedly was provided an inaccurate drug test screening test. Walk me through this. What's different about this story? And tell us just a little bit more about Rachel, the woman that you interviewed.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, this is a part of an ongoing series called Stolen Sobriety. And as that name implies, we talk to families who admit they've had issues with drugs. They openly admit they've had drug addictions and they understand that's why their children are in the child welfare agency here in Georgia. And in order to get their kids back, they agree to these random drug screens and they want to stay on the straight and narrow, and they remain sober, but they allege these drug screens are inadequate, that there are some false positives. So that's the backstory, and that is where that name derives. They say these tests are stealing my sobriety. What makes this particular story different is that this mom says she has never done drugs a day in her life. The only reason why she says her kids are in the custody of Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services is because she claims she wrongfully tested positive for methamphetamine after giving birth to her first child. And because of that first case, there was an ongoing case with her second child. But again, this is a part of the series Stolen Sobriety. But just to be clear, Rachel Fuller maintains she is not sober in the sense that she's fighting or beating an addiction. She's never done drugs, the mom says. So listen to Rachel's Fuller story.
I made this for her on her first birthday.
Rachel Fuller shows us her 4-year-old daughter's bedroom.
It just feels empty.
Across the hall, there's one for her 3-year-old son, too. Neither toddler is home. In fact, the children have not been in years.
So your kids are not with you right now. Where are they?
My rights have actually been terminated.
The last time Rachel saw them was February 2024, but this case goes back to 2020, the first time she gave birth. Per stated process after labor and delivery, the hospital drug screened mom and her newborn. They tested positive for methamphetamine.
I was shocked because I'm a nurse, I'm an RN, I've been a nurse for 9 years. It was just really shocking to me.
Georgia's Division of Family and Children's Services, DFACS, intervened, eventually taking custody of Rachel's daughter. When she later gave birth to a son, she says because of the ongoing open case, the state agency took custody of him too.
She loves unicorns.
So to get her kids back, she agreed to random drug screens.
Have you ever done drugs?
I've never done drugs.
The mom thought the mandated test would prove her innocence. Instead, DFACS records said it repeatedly proved Rachel was positive for meth.
When you know you don't use a drug, but everyone around you is looking at you and they have these tests, in the beginning I didn't understand why I was failing.
Until recently.
I have very severe asthma to the point where I've been intubated and all kinds of stuff.
Medical records document it as a chronic problem. The solution? Inhalers. The inhaler shrinks blood vessels and tissue to open up airways. Rachel uses multiple, including this one, the over-the-counter nasal decongestion inhaler levomethamphetamine. Just as the name implies, the active ingredient, methamphetamine. And it's why Rachel believes her drug screens kept coming back positive.
I love my kids more than anything. And I've never stopped fighting. And I'm never going to stop fighting. I want my children back.
Atlanta News First Investigates uncovered some labs contracted to do drug screens on behalf of the state do not perform a specialized test that distinguishes legal meth like medicine and inhalers from illicit meth like the street drug. That highly specialized test, known as the DL isomer. It can be expensive, pose technical challenges, and state policy does not require it. In Rachel's case, The state made an error by not performing it and had no reliable evidence to demonstrate she has used or abused controlled substances, according to an independent toxicology report presented in court on the mom's behalf. Its author, Dr. Lyle Burgoon, a veteran toxicologist who worked for the Environmental Protection Agency and U.S. Army. Despite their testimony, court records suggest the state did not find Rachel's claims credible. Trial transcripts show DFAC's attorneys accused the mother of falsifying paperwork in the past, an allegation Rachel admits. She says she sent an email to the facility where she visited her kids, making it look as if the caseworker granted Rachel permission to see her kids sooner than allowed.
So would you agree you falsified documentation?
I do agree with that, but I shouldn't have been put in that position. I'm not a dishonest person, but anyone, when they're desperate enough for their children.
Alleging if the tests were accurate in the first place, her kids would have never been in state custody.
To a sibling or to a parent.
Melissa Carter sees it that way too.
We need to require confirmation testing, and we need to create mechanisms to pay for it.
The executive director for Barton Child Law and Policy says there should be immediate changes to mandate specific drug screen standards for labs contracted to do work on behalf of Georgia.
There's a real key need here to act with urgency.
Melissa argues taxpayers are footing a bill for incomplete work.
These are not one-offs. This actually is kind of just routine in our child welfare system.
It's unclear how often false positives occur in these cases, but what is certain, a significant number of Georgia parents are subjected to these types of drug screens. We found 40% of all Georgia's child welfare cases are due to substance use allegations.
At this point, this bureaucracy is knowingly recommitted, doubling down, or at least sustaining its kind of routine practices of relying on these fallible drug tests. The system itself is perpetuating the very harm that it's supposed to be responsible for protecting children from.
Protecting children like Rachel's.
It's the worst feeling. It's been hell. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's so hard to be in this house and see them memories everywhere.
Oh, Sarah, you really feel for Rachel. Where does the state stand? What's their response to Rachel's claims?
Well, as you know, the state rarely responds, at least to specific cases. They always cite state confidentiality law, so it was very similar in this circumstance. They did not comment directly on Rachel's Fuller's case, but as we mentioned in the story, there are court transcripts which seemingly suggest the state did not find her claims plausible. They didn't even find her as someone who was credible because she mentioned that she forged an email to make it look like it was coming from a caseworker, and that email did not come from a caseworker. So that's where DFAC stands in all of this. But in the broader scheme of things, the state agency has confirmed to us that they are in the beginning stages of an internal audit. If you know anything about this series, we've reported on some other states having similar issues with these false positive allegations, and DFAC says that they are in the very early stages of reaching out to some of those other states to figure out how they did an internal review, and that they will implement that here in the state of Georgia, this internal review, and based off that review, they say they'll consider whether there needs to be some kind of policy change.
Yeah, are there any states that are doing this right, that are not having so many of these false positives? I know that false positives happen.
They happen, yes.
They just happen. But is there any state that's maybe implemented something that is maybe preventing situations where you're pulling a kid from a family?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. As Melissa Carter said in the story, states in general, but certainly Georgia, should require confirmation testing. So we call it that isomer specific testing, the DL isomer in this particular series. But in general, there should be that confirmation testing. So if some states are doing that, that's where you would see that success, at least in minimizing the allegations of false positives. We can assume that Georgia DFACS reached out to the state of Michigan because they've had some of the same labs that have done the drug screening. So we've reached out to Michigan to see what audits or internal reviews they've done, and maybe they can provide some insight to us about the success they've had since in the last few years.
How did you hear about her case? You know, this is the behind the scenes or behind the investigation podcast. I'm kind of curious to see how did you reach out to her?
She reached out to us, and as you know, Andy, sometimes when you do a story, it strikes a chord with the audience. It really resonates with people, and we had been doing this series, and this mom reached out to us a while back, but as we should do as journalists, we've got to vet it. So we spent many months vetting this and wanting to get the court trial transcripts, because this one was different from all the other allegations. She's saying she's never done a drug a day in her life. So we needed to do a deep dive. But she reached out to us and she was like, hey, I'm a nurse. Something similar is happening to me. Can you please share my story? So we obviously encourage the audience, if you ever see something in our newscast or hear something in our newscast or in this podcast and think you've got a story to tell, of course, reach out to us. We want to hear it.
Yeah, she's got an attorney, right?
Yeah, and she's got an attorney, and that leads me to that next point. She's got several attorneys, organizations backing her, and they are in the process of filing that application for an appeal directly to the state Supreme Court, because as we mentioned in the story, her parental rights are terminated.
Yeah.
That means she can't see her kids, she's not visiting her kids, she's not in her kids' life, and so she's hoping to get those parental rights restored, so they're appealing directly to the state Supreme Court. We'll see if the state Supreme Court takes up the case. Unclear on a timeline.
You know, I thought was really interesting in your story, and I'm actually glad that you included it, is that acknowledgement that she forged that email and your question, your Q&A. Talk to me about that conversation, because I know she probably knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Did you tell her, like, hey, I'm going to ask you about this?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
And I was very transparent with her, as she was seemingly transparent with me, just pulling back the curtain, as we mentioned, vetting a story. And so when she reached out to me, sometimes with cases like this in the child welfare system, it's not all public record because of the state confidentiality laws, because this involves children. So sometimes we are at the mercy of the parent or the family giving us documentation. So in my conversations with her, I'm like, hey, I'm going to need you to give me the court trial transcripts. I want to see what was said about you, the allegations that the state made about you and your family. And she worked to get me those trial transcripts, because those were not public record for the media or just even the general public. And I spent days, it was a lot of pages. I think she was on trial for like 4 days. And so there was hundreds and hundreds of trial transcripts.
That's a novel.
And we read through them all. And after that, I said, hey, if we're going to move forward with this story, we are going to have to address the elephant. It seems like they don't feel like you're credible, and we want to be able to talk to that point. And she was open to it, and so were her attorneys.
So it's little details like that you just explained, the extra effort to go and vet the story.
Yeah.
I think that people don't appreciate what's happening behind the scenes, and what I think is so valuable about this podcast is that we literally tell you all the processes and pull back that curtain. And I don't think people realize how much work goes into one story. They see a 3-5 minute story, but they didn't hear the piece that you just explained, the hours or days that it took to read the entire transcript. So Sierra, kudos to you, and I'm so glad that you are doing this series. It's really important. You can watch and listen to more of Sierra's stories and her Stolen Sobriety series in this story on AtlantaNewsFirst.com and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.